Dom, you and I are both middle-aged men.
And we should address the elephant in the gazebo, which is the reason why you've not been on TV as much as you would have liked this week, Mark.
Yeah, I have a bash on the top lip thanks to a tumble in London, and you have a gammy hand.
I do. I have a swollen hand because I had an accident dancing. You have a moustache-like scar in the wrong spot, which has led to comparisons between you and Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, let's stick with Charlie Chaplin. I am Mark Stone.
And I'm Dominic Wagcorn, and a week on from us both being at Windsor Castle, you and I are reunited at the United Nations headquarters in New York City for the UN General Assembly.
Yeah, on Tuesday it was Donald Trump's turn to speak to the world's dignitaries. Everyone braced themselves. We knew he would be here to provoke and to poke. That is proudly now his way. And so he did, on immigration, on climate change, on London's mayor no less. But then a startling shift from him later in the day on Ukraine. Or was it? We'll get into all that. So Dom, here we are in the UN grounds. There are helicopters buzzing overhead. It's early evening. And, you know, what a day.
Yeah, well, we're used to these kind of days. You don't quite know where they're going to go next, but it has been a real roller coaster of a ride. I'm sort of letting the dust settle after what's been a bit of a whiplash day.
It has, and it's a day that kind of started, I think, with anticipation because it was Trump's day in the General Assembly. This is the week when the world's leaders come to New York. All the leaders, or their foreign ministers, if the leaders can't be bothered to turn up, do a speech. And today was Trump's slot. And anticipation, I think, because no one quite knows ever what Trump's going to say, do they?
No, but the White House has said it was going to be a major foreign policy speech, one of the biggest of his second term as president. It didn't turn out to be that. Actually, it turned out to be more of a kind of election rally speech, didn't it?
An election rally speech where he hit quite a lot of domestic buttons.
Yeah.
He talked about immigration a lot. Basically told the whole world that they'd all got it wrong and he'd got it right. I'm quite good at this sort of stuff, he said. And lots on climate change too. Yeah,
for me, Trump's speeches are often like, for him, politics is like wrestling, isn't it? You know, I am the greatest, you are the meanest, these are all the bad guys. So he goes for the villains, he lines them up, and then he sort of knocks them down and slays them. So we had Europe, we had immigrants, as you say, we had London's mayor, Sadiq Khan, we had climate change-obsessed liberals, and I think the audience is largely outside. The intended audience was largely outside the hall because he said in his speech that, you know, his approval ratings have never been higher. That's nonsense. You know, they've never been lower in this at this stage in his presidency. And so I think he's trying to sort of, you know, he's throwing a lot of red meat to his supporters. He's having a go at all these, as I say, these kind of liberal villains. And he's doing it in this place, which is for a lot of his supporters, one of those awful kind of world organisations about which there's all these conspiracy theories. And he was having a pop at the UN more than anything else, really.
I didn't think of it at the time because I was too busy working to save millions of lives. That is the saving and stopping of these wars. But later I realized that the United Nations wasn't there for us. They weren't there. I thought of it really after the fact, not during these negotiations, which were not easy. That being the case, what is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential. I've always said it. It has such tremendous, tremendous potential. But it's not even coming close to living up to that potential. For the most part, at least for now, all they seem to do is write a really strongly worded letter and then never follow that letter up. It's empty words, and empty words don't solve war.
Yeah, I felt it was a pop at the UN from the moment he took to the podium, and he had a few gags to help him along the way, because a broken escalator on his way up to the chamber and a broken auto cue in the chamber provided kind of the fuel for his initial rant against the UN.
All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen. But she's in great shape. We're both in good shape. We both stood. And then a teleprompter that didn't work. These are the two things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter. Thank you very much.
He also got into the fact that he tried to pitch to renovate the hall here. a long time ago, and it still rankles clearly. And he said, you've still not done with it what I could have done. And that led him down this sort of weird weave where he got really quite obsessed with that. And I think that was part of the problem with this. I think he clearly had a scripted speech, but he kept going off it and he kept weaving in different directions. I think that for me, that was the beginning of his digressions. And so this ended up being a speech that went on for almost an hour. But that was the starting point, I think. He was very annoyed about the UN. And then at times, he sounded like a kind of old man talking to himself in Central Park, going on about climate change, going on about windmills, slightly like a pub bore, really. And then just at the end, he got back to the theme of the speech, which was trying to get the world to rally behind America and say how great America was. But by that point, I think most people have kind of got very confused.
He also got very irritated with the fact that that the UN hadn't called him up. He didn't quite say who at the UN was supposed to call him up, but the UN hadn't called him up to congratulate him on all the wars that he had solved. For me, he kind of chose not to recognise that the UN is only the sum of its parts. It's a body that relies on consensus. It's a body that's hampered by vetoes, so it can't do what he says it should be able to do. We thought, as you say, that his focus would be on the big geopolitical challenges, Gaza and Ukraine. There was a suggestion early on in the day from some British officials that he might use the speech to recognise Israeli annexation of parts of the West Bank. He didn't do that. In fact, on Gaza, he offered no solution, nothing new there, except to repeat the call for the hostages to be released. And on Ukraine, in the speech at least, very little, except some contrition, saying, look, I had no idea that it would be so hard to solve this one.
Yeah, and on Ukraine, he was saying that he is prepared to impose tougher sanctions on Russia, specifically on its oil trade, but Europe's got to do the same. And we heard this sort of excuse for not doing more against Russia that he's beginning to kind of develop as a theme in his speeches and what he says about Ukraine, which is that he's found out Europe buys a lot of energy from Russia, and he's not going to do much about Russia until they stop doing so. I spoke to a member of the Ukrainian delegation, and he said actually he felt there is a shift going on there, but nothing like the shift we heard about later in the day.
So let's get on to that, because that was really fascinating. The day was we thought the day was done. We thought that the day was Trump's speech, which turned out to be a day that he just railed against the United Nations. But it wasn't. I got word yesterday that Zelenskyy, Ukraine's president, was going to talk to a small group of journalists. I was among those invited. We turned up at the point where we were supposed to meet, and we were told it's been delayed. He's actually going to meet the American president instead. Come back here in an hour, we were told. By the time we got back, Trump had just posted something on Truth Social. You've got it there, I think. What did Trump
should we get into it? And you sent me a message halfway through the afternoon saying, have you seen this? And there was a kind of buzz around the media tent as people were saying the same thing. Have you seen this? This looks like a major shift from Trump. And what he says is, after getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it's causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win, in capital letters, all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time, patience and financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO, the original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Why not? Russia has been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years, a war that should have taken a real military power less than a week to win. So he had a real go at Russia. And later on, he called Russia a paper tiger, but later on he said, not only can Ukraine take back its borders, but possibly take more. So almost hinting that Ukraine could take a chunk of Russia. This is from the American president who, back in February, was saying, Ukraine, you have no cards. And it was always said that Ukraine shouldn't have got involved in this fight because Russia's simply too powerful. A grotesque misrepresentation of history, but always said that Ukraine is the weaker part of this conflict. Now seems to be saying that actually Russia's in trouble and Ukraine could actually win.
Yeah, and also saying you can fight and take all your land back. A remarkable U-turn for a president who said that Ukraine must give up the east of the country and forget about Crimea. Now, this strange U-turn. Unsurprisingly, Zelenskyy was a happy man as he walked into the news conference, which by this stage had got a lot larger.
Trump is a game changer.
Tell us how significant is this post by the president? How significant is
Madame
it?
Annalena Baerbock is waiting.
It's a big shift by President Trump.
Shift. This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's a big shift. It's very positive.
So flattery for Trump there. He is the game changer. And then when I pressed him on this issue and I said, look, is this post significant? hugely significant.
But what's
so
also
he thinks.
interesting, what's also interesting is, very interesting what he said to you, but also what Trump said alongside Emmanuel Macron, the French president, earlier, where he said, "I thought I had a relationship with Putin. It didn't mean what I thought it meant. It's almost like, Putin, you mean nothing to me now." And what's interesting is the White House has been retweeting these moments.
Yeah,
So
big time.
making something of saying, this is a significant change, and we're putting it out there. Quite happy for it to be seen that way, emphasising what does seem to be a big shift. Now, we have to always, qualify everything with Trump. And as soon as I saw that, I was coming here to do a live, and on the way here, I saw a well-known Western diplomat, can't really say who he was, but I said, "Have you seen this tweet?" And he said, "No." I read it out, part of it, out to him, and he kind of, his eyebrows raised, but then he said, "Yeah, but we've seen false dawns before. We saw what happened with North Korea's dictator Kim Jong-un with the train and the promise that things were going to get better and more the way we wanted them to, and they didn't in the end. So be cautious." Wise words from an old diplomat, but certainly this does seem to be a major shift in direction.
It does, but to your diplomat pal's point, at the end of this same post, he then did say, "We will continue to supply weapons to NATO for NATO to do what they want with them." Good news. And then he says, "Good luck to them all."
Yeah, and what he doesn't say is, "I'm now going to apply those massive sanctions which my allies in Capitol Hill and my allies in Europe think have to be brought to bear to really bring Putin to his knees." He seems to be saying in this, and we'll see what else he says on this front, is it's up to you, Europe, and I'm going to sell you the weapons that the European members of NATO. Good luck to you both.
Yeah, I mean, and naturally, Zelenskyy was happy. I mean, why wouldn't he be? He's going to take this and he's going to run with it. And there was another thing that Trump said as well during a public moment in what was otherwise a private meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy. He was asked whether he thinks NATO countries should shoot down Russian planes if they're in European airspace, and he said, yes. One word, yes. That was significant.
Yeah, which is interesting because there's been all this reporting about members of the administration worried about the Estoniaization of policy, saying that NATO is getting too sort of caught up with a kind of gung-ho attitude of countries like Estonia, Baltic nations who are going to be too trigger happy and too prepared to shoot down these jets. And reports were that Washington, or Trump was trying to the Trump administration was trying to rein them back, but he seems happy with the idea. I think what's also interesting, Mark, is that the way he talks about it in this post is it's all about economic analysis. He's a businessman. He says that Russia is losing this war economically, and we have had some very interesting analysis of what damage Ukraine is doing to Russia's oil industry itself in a military sense, not with sanctions, but hitting 16 out of 38 refineries hit since August. That is having a massive effect, and it's leading to the kind of gasoline queues that Trump talks about in this post. So clearly he's aware of information that makes it look like Russia is now losing. He doesn't like losers, he likes to back winners, and that may be why he's shifting in this way.
One thing I was struck by in the half an hour or so I was with Zelenskyy is he was asked so many times, he would not be drawn on what information Trump now had in his hands that had precipitated this shift in position. He was asked repeatedly, what does Trump know that he didn't know before? He said it was something to do with battlefield assessments, but he would not be drawn on it. So something's going on.
Yeah, which has led to some speculation that actually the Ukrainians are giving the Americans information about the front line, which kind of undermines what Putin is saying about the front line. Putin's clearly giving a sense that the war's going his way, and maybe the scales are falling from Trump's eyes. Who knows?
Anyway, just briefly on your point on what we were discussing about Russian planes being shot down, I caught up with the foreign minister of the Netherlands and said to him, would you, as a NATO country, be willing to shoot down Russian planes? Slightly different answer. So the Netherlands firmly supports shooting down Russian jets in NATO airspace?
Well, we don't support shooting down, but we are deadly against illegal infringements into our airspace, and Russia needs to understand that and stay away.
Just on that, Dom, we were joking earlier on, we need Shazam for diplomats, don't we here?
We said that last year, and you do, because there are so many diplomats, and they change, and so many different world leaders, and there are 193 or 4 nations here, I think, and you can't, even in our jobs, you can't remember who they all are. But they come across the plaza up there very quickly, and you've got a couple of seconds to work out who it is.
Google very quickly Oh yeah, that is the Dutch foreign minister.
But you moved in on the Germans, I think, fairly quickly.
I did move in on the Germans. I asked the German foreign minister why Germany was still buying Russian energy, a lot of it, and he just wouldn't answer the question, didn't say a word, just walked on.
And those who have commented on Donald Trump's apparent change of heart, like the Czech president speaking to Yalda earlier, was saying, well, I'll judge him by his actions, not his words. And I think that's how most people are going to come down. And obviously we're going to watch very closely and see what Zelenskyy has to say. What's the tone of his speech going to be? Is it going to be cautious, or is it actually going to be fairly upbeat? And then, of course, Sergei Lavrov, the kind of
wily foreign minister.
Wily, but a bruiser of a foreign minister, Russia's foreign minister. I think he speaks on Saturday. By that point, we're going to have a clearer sense of where Trump is really going and how this news is sinking in the Kremlin.
Yeah, because Trump will potentially, if he is on form, flip-flop a few times before the weekend.
Most likely. People have always said with Trump and Ukraine, it's like a super tanker. We heard Jeremy Hunt saying that last week. Gradually, bit by bit, he is coming around to the European side. So there will be, he'll be veering both sides. But there does seem to be a direction of travel here that is moving in Ukraine's favour.
Big day, bit of a head spinner. Dom, I know you've got to head off. Please do come back soon on the pod.
Thank you very much. Would love to. Yeah, let's see how the day pans out the rest of the week.
So Dom's gone, but it's been a big day for the entertainment world here in the United States because Jimmy Kimmel cancelled just last week. He is back. Martha, he wasn't gone for long.
Yeah, he certainly wasn't. It's less than a week since Kimmel was taken off air after comments that he made about the alleged assassin of the conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Kimmel basically said on his show, which is a late night comedy show, that the MAGA right had been trying to capitalise on Kirk's murder, that they'd been mischaracterising his alleged killer's political leanings. This outraged Team Trump. There was a comment on a podcast from Brendan Carr. He is the chair of the FCC, which is the TV regulator here, appointed by Trump. And Carr basically said that ABC, which broadcasts the Jimmy Kimmel show, could, in his words, do this the easy way or the hard way, basically imploring them to take action on Kimmel. And hours later, Disney, which is ABC's parent company, suspended Kimmel indefinitely. But less than a week later, they brought him back. And Kimmel, highly anticipated, the biggest show of his life, he comes out and he is all guns blazing, no holds barred.
So Martha, I've missed all this. Tell me, how did he seem and what was the mood in the audience?
Well, for starters, he compared the guy that I mentioned earlier, Brendan Carr, the head of the TV regulator, to a mob boss. Kimmel came on stage to rapturous applause. Much of his audience is left-leaning Democrat voters. He makes a wisecrack straight away about him being interrupted. He listed all the people that he had to thank who had been in touch with him over the course of the last week, reams and reams of people, especially his fellow late night talk show hosts. But it was pretty clear from the start that Kimmel was emotional. He was under a huge amount of pressure. His voice was hoarse and cracking at times. There had been calls from some on the right for him to issue an apology for what he said about Charlie Kirk and the political reaction to his murder. He didn't do that. He didn't issue an apology. But what he did do was spend a long time clarifying how abhorrent he found the murder of this young man, in his words.
But I do want to make something clear because it's important to me as a human, and that is, you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't think there's anything funny about it. I posted a message on Instagram on the day he was killed, sending love to his family and asking for compassion, and I meant it, and I still do. Nor was it my intention to blame any specific group for the actions of what it was obviously a deeply disturbed individual. That was really the opposite of the point I was trying to make. But I understand that to some that felt either ill-timed or unclear, or maybe both. And for those who think I did point a finger, I get why you're upset.
His ire, though, was mostly reserved for the current administration and the president. He suggested that Donald Trump posed a grave threat to free speech in this country and that he was trying to pick off comedians one by one.
We get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this. I've had the opportunity to meet and spend time with comedians and talk show hosts from countries like Russia, countries in the Middle East, who tell me they would get thrown in prison for making fun of those in power, and worse than being thrown in prison. They know how lucky we are here. Our freedom to speak is what they admire most about this country. And that's something I'm embarrassed to say I took for granted until they pulled my friend Steven off the air and tried to coerce the affiliates who run our show in the cities that you live in to take my show off the air. That's not legal. That's not American. That is un-American, and it is so dangerous.
So we talked about it yesterday, didn't we? Would the local affiliate channels across America all bring back Kimmel on air? Well, now we have the answer.
That's right, Mark. You know, Kimmel may have been back on air, but not everyone in the United States was watching. In fact, vast swathes of the country weren't able to, and that's because 25% of local ABC stations chose not to show The Kimmel Show. These are the stations owned by two companies, Sinclair and Nexstar, who are refusing to show Kimmel. Nexstar, perhaps because they need to stay in favour with the Trump administration. They're currently going through a very lucrative business merger. They need the approval of the FCC, that body I keep mentioning, and its chair, Brendan Carr, in order for that deal to go through. Sinclair, the other company, their executive feels very strongly about Kimmel's comments. He demanded that the comedian publicly apologise to Charlie Kirk's family and make a monetary donation to them. I guess there is the possibility that as things develop, that Kimmel may return to those local stations, but a fascinating standoff between them and Disney, the parent company.
Yes, local networks or not, you did manage to speak to people queuing up outside to get their spot in the audience. I guess they must have been delighted to have Kimmel back on air.
Yeah, these people had the hottest ticket in town, no doubt about it. And they were queuing outside the El Capitan Theatre, the studio where the show films on Hollywood Boulevard. A lot of them had tickets to see Jimmy Kimmel. Last week, before he got suspended, they weren't necessarily expecting to see him back, and certainly not so soon. I spoke, first of all, to Jason Amaraji, who had travelled from Washington, D.C. He told me that he believes Kimmel's suspension was part of a trend to dismantle the late night comedy show roster.
I mean, it's very clear this is just part of the bigger picture of what's going on right now. So, you know, they're picking people off one by one. Colbert was this summer, now him. So it is actually nice that he's back on the air, but it's only undoubtedly going to continue. I would be shocked if this was the last thing that happens in this sort of back and forth.
It feels monumental, this moment, just of the whole political agenda that's going on both sides. But we're here to support Jimmy Kimmel and, you know, freedom of speech as an American.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see Jimmy back in action. It's been creating waves because what does this mean for journalism? What does this mean for content creation? Is internet a better place than TV is? So lots of questions around that. Yeah.
What do you make of the fact that a lot of local ABC stations are still not carrying the Jimmy Kimmel Show tonight?
I think that speaks volumes about where the power is, where the funding comes from, and what that means for the average citizen. But this also goes to show that when the collective power speaks up, even big conglomerates can't stay still, and they have to take action.
But, you know, not everyone agrees. Jane Walden from Glendale City in California, she was wandering past the studio. I stopped her, I asked what she thought, and she immediately made clear that she was furious that Kimmel had been brought back.
All BS. ABC caved in, Disney caved in, their stocks were tanking. Jimmy Kimmel should have been gone a long time ago. Every person that he brings on his show is always a Democratic person. Democrats all the way. He is so anti-Trump, it's despicable. They're all out there, free Jimmy, free Jimmy. Free Jimmy from what? If I would have said something like that as a Democrat, I would have been fired. He's fired because he sucks.
President Trump, as you might expect, issued a response to Kimmel's return on Truth Social. He said, let Jimmy Kimmel rot in his bad ratings. But I think the ironic thing is that Kimmel had probably the biggest audience he will ever have in his life because of all this. Kimmel and his fellow late night comedians are being blessed by this president with endless material. There is so much to talk about, and that will continue.
Thanks, Martha. Now, just before we go, as if there wasn't already enough news swirling around, Ryan Ruth, remember him? He's the man who attempted to assassinate Donald Trump that second time on his golf course in Florida. He has been found guilty on all charges. That happened over the course of the past 24 hours. Donald Trump hailed the conviction a very big moment for justice, capital letters, in America. So it never stops. Thanks for listening. Do send us your emails, trump100@sky.uk. You can always watch us on YouTube as well. Just search Trump 100 Sky News. We will be back on Friday. See you then.